Welcome, everyone, to In the Driver's Seat, the podcast that's all about exploring how to improve the value of your business. My name is Simon Zryd, and together with Steven Kohnke, we co-host this podcast together. We're both partners at Denver Business Coach, certified exit planning advisor, certified value builders, and have worked with business owners for close to a decade now in the realm of value building and exit planning. At Denver Business Coach, we have a team of 9 advisors that have all sold their company and are now helping business owners build valuable, sellable companies. And this podcast primary mission and purpose is to bring the conversation of value building front and center into the now for business owners, even if it's 3, 5, 10 years out of when you want to exit your business. But both Stephen and I, and we believe that you can start this conversation soon enough, because if you're only doing it at the very end, your results are not going to be the ones that you're hope for. So specifically, there are 2 statistics that we, have come across, learned, and seen with our own eyes in terms of the reality of what business exiting looks like for business owners. Let Stephen introduce those and then tie that into our mission and our conversation for today.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So those 2 stats that you're talking about are 3 out of 4 businesses that go to sell on the market do not sell. And that statistic coupled with anywhere from 70 to 90% of a business owner's wealth is tied up in that same business. So those 2 stats are obviously pretty shocking, and we don't like those. So that's our whole mission here is to help business owners prepare earlier and more often, so they're not met with this stark contrast of bad stats when trying to sell their business and cash in on 20, 30 plus years of hard blood, sweat, and tears put into it.
Yeah. So, Stephen, last week we started talking about what I call like the human side of things. We had in the first many episodes, we talked a lot about the business. We talked a lot about KPIs. We talked what drives value, what does the process of selling a business look like, and both you and I and our team, we know that it's easy to come up with a plan. It's easy to identify the gaps, in quotes, easy, in terms of what a best-in-class business would look like and where a business owner's current performance is. And to some extent, it's also not that difficult to maybe identify what needs to happen to close that gap. But then, as with anything, it's like the execution of it is the hard part. Like any business owner still has usually a family. They have their own health situations. They have their own personalities. They have their ego. They have team dynamics going on. Like there's a lot of stuff that doesn't show up on a strategic plan per se that business owners deal with. And so we started exploring last week, like how do we as business owners show up, in the best way possible to execute on the plan and show up as a strong, business owner that's working on their business. So, last week we talked a little bit about staying more centered. I call it like staying more centered and equiposed, like not be that exposed to the highs and lows of business, which we all know as entrepreneurs. Like we can go from the world is great and we're on top of Mount Everest to like I'm damned in eternal hell and we'll never get out of it, all in one day or 1 hour, even at times. But so staying more centered. We talked about seeking out objectivity and then also finding your tribe, your people, your advisory team, essentially. And so today we want to expand on that conversation and maybe introduce a couple new ways and support for business owners as well. And maybe let's start out with, I think we touched on it briefly last week, Stephen. We talked about in the Value Builder questionnaire, we asked that question, do
Mhm.
you consider yourself a business owner or someone who owns a business? Is
Right.
that the question?
That's the question. Yeah,
That's the
it's
question. And you said it's like a very nuance, it on if you don't pay attention, it's like the same thing, but it can be the world of difference if you understand what the difference is. So maybe let's start there and zoom in a little bit and why it's important, how one relates to themselves.
it's all about identity, right? And saying I am a business owner is your identity is wrapped up in owning that business. You and the business are one and the same, in other words. And if you say I am someone who owns a business, that's just something you do. It's like I am someone who builds birdhouses. I'm an individual outside of building birdhouses. So I mean, it's like you said, it can sound like the same question, but how you actually introduce yourself, and it's something I pay attention to. I'm sure you do as well when talking with, not only clients but any business owner, anyone in our network, of how are they introducing themselves? Of, do they consider themselves to be the business, or as someone who works on the business? And I think that's a very important distinction.
Mhm.
We want people really being able to see themselves outside of the business. And I think that's what, depending on how they answer that question, that's one of the first things we'll look at too, of how to separate them.
And it's interesting. I'm in several of those conversations right now when we set goals on where we want to be, if you're not careful as a business owner, you're coming up with these great goals, and ambitious goals at times, and stretch goals and all of that. But but if you don't have the personal side figured out and what you want your family life to look like and what you want your hobbies or your free time to be, then by default, that's going to be the thing that's going to suffer. And you're going to spend more time in the business. And I literally today have this example of someone needing to put together a performance improvement plan for an employee. And they were like, great, I can do it today, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And without hesitation, they scheduled something at 8:30 p.m. And so we had to come back and say, okay, is that in alignment with what is important to you as it relates to your family life? What about your kids? What about your spouse? Um, and they realized like how quickly that barrier is just broken essentially because it's important in the business and it needs to get done. And so I feel like in that regard, there is this conversation of okay, yes, the business itself is an entity and is you're looking to accomplish goals, but it's also there to serve you personally. And I feel like a lot of business owners haven't spent the time to really define what is important to them as personal core values, relationships, time with kids, and are really firm about holding those lines. Like, yeah. Um,
Being able to pay attention to those, and also, um, I think the other part about this question is a stat we don't talk about as often. We may have mentioned it in the past, but the satisfaction of selling the business. Ultimately, we all exit, and if you can sell the business, most business owners, the stat is 75%, 3 out of 4, regret selling their business, because if they're answering the question as they identify with as the business in that way, they're selling off a part of themselves. A part of themselves is gone instead of just, something they're working on
yeah.
uh, in that way.
I was thinking about this, and this might be a total offline conversation, but you know how we talk about profit first, both Stephen and I are, profit first professionals and help companies implement that. And that whole methodology goes towards what I would call money freedom, right? Like you make sure you pay yourself first. whether it's your profit, your income, personal income, your taxes, you take care of yourself first on the money side. The same thing should exist for time freedom.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think Dan Sullivan in one of his books has like the freedom days and the buffer days. But I feel like there's an opportunity there to be more intentional for business owners to say, okay, yes, I'm going to take my money first, and I'm taking my time first, and then figure out what's left. So I think we can zoom into that. I don't know if there are programs out there that really do that well, but I'd love to explore that from a mindset perspective as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Putting yourself first, putting your own money first, uh, and then business can come after that.
Yeah. And knowing that innovation will drive,
Hmm.
still do it, and innovation will drive, but you're making sure that what is most important is taken care of. So anyway, I like exploring that because I don't think we have all the answers either. But when it comes around exploring identity, am I a business coach or do I own a business coaching company? Am I, like that? There's a difference there, and
Hmm.
I think there's further to explore.
I think that actually ties in well, at least the time freedom side of things, um, to one of the other factors of the don't keep pushing. Give yourself the mental breaks and the mental rest and physical rest in some cases, um, after wins, to not keep pushing, right? Like we were talking before we started recording of, being able to stop and slow down and celebrate the wins too. And I think what you mentioned of the time freedom of being able to reset and have that built into, call it your annual calendar, setting up your annual calendar, having that built into your schedule so you have that time to reset. You've planned it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's lots of strategies around that. Blocking out your calendar, making up appointment, fictional characters, whatever. To I've heard like people say, they just block out their time with their kids, and it's like my board meeting, and that's what's in the calendar, and no one needs to know what's happening there.
Hmm.
But you still have to be situated within yourself first to be able to even call out that that's important and
Hmm.
protect it against the tyranny of the urgent, I guess, when it comes to business.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay, so that's one other takeaway, right? Like separate yourself or understand that you are not your business. You are a person, a steward of your business, the CEO of your business, an owner. But you're really like one step removed. Um, and and there's different strategies to help you get clear about that distinction, I think. Ultimately, I just want to tie back with one sentence is it allows you to again be more in control and a proactive place rather than if you take everything personal by default you're going to be reactive, you're going to be more agitated, you're going to be more exposed to all the stuff that's going on versus like being more of a steward, architect, controller kind of person.
Hmm.
um all right, maybe so then let's go on to the next next area that I think can be helpful, which is we called it get clear on your pull factors. And maybe you
Hmm.
you can describe a little bit. We have like these push pull dynamics, that we often refer to when it comes to exit planning, but also just in any given year we're always in that dynamic. It's just how, are we aware of what's going on or not, I guess.
I think in this frame we're referencing like the exit, right? The push and pull factors of at least wanting to exit. And push factors are something that's going on inside the business that you may not like or want to get away from. I think some of the examples that we're talking about are uh, increased competition or frustrating employees, or if you're an industry that's heavily regulated, something that really um, puts a damper on your strategy or something like that, where it's like, I got to get out. I got to get out of this business. It's killing me. Or I've heard that phrase many times. Whereas a pull factor is something that you're excited about, something that might pull you out of the business, and that can be traveling, starting a new business. That can be, other examples have been writing a book or just plain spending more time with family too. Um, there's a lot of different strategies that uh, exit and soft exits that people can use to experience more of those pull factors in a short-term manner as well. So those are kind of things that you can get excited about instead of getting frustrated about, that will help you understand. I know we're talking about the individual, who they are, what they want to be doing, what gets them excited, and I think that also ties back into that satisfaction of exiting a business, is when they are exiting for pull factors and not for push factors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think a lot of, listeners can relate to this in terms of even outside of the business, right? Like if you sign up for a race, for example, or if you have a big event coming up and you want to look well in your outfit or whatever, it's like, okay, there's something that's like exciting about it that then allows you to be clear enough in your thinking and in your setting of priorities and allocating time for whatever that drives you towards accomplishing that goal. And because I think, and we've talked about this, like I think one of the hardest thing for business owners, right, at any given point is not just the individual task that's in front of them, because usually they're experts at a lot of things. It's like that constant tension between, having to wear five different hats or having, um, not having the depth of team to kind of like have some buffer between the day-to-day stuff and the strategic planning. So it's like the predicament you're in is like the harder part than the work that you're doing. But understanding your pull factor is like, okay, it gives you a certain clarity of what's important and therefore how you're wanting to show up in your day-to-day. Um, and and what I like about it also is like it's a positive internal conversation versus like, I hate these regulations or da da da, and you're cultivating that energy, more versus, okay, I can't wait to, or I'm so excited about, right? Like that is just a different energy about it, and that shows up in the conversations you have and how you're doing your work and everything. So
Mhm.
um yeah. Anything else about that? I mean, do you see when you work with clients that you're making a point again of stopping to say focusing on personal goals also versus just business goals?
Yeah, and they tie in, right? So sometimes how I talk about it is, um, how do you view your business that you're working on and creating, separating yourself from the business, help you accomplish what you want to do in life? What are those life aspirations? What level do you want to get at? What's important to you? How do you want to show up in life? And then how can that business be a part of helping to get you there?
Yeah,
I think that really ties it in,
yeah.
that personal side.
And I think maybe one other thing you're pointing to it is like the why behind things. Like the clearer you are, why is something important, connecting to it. Um, that gives you that the actual benefit of being excited about something is what I feel, versus it just being like a mental exercise of this is our goal. But like, no, there's getting to emotionally connect with the outcome that we're putting down on our plans.
Mhm.
All right, let's do maybe one more tool, and then we'll have further conversation. So this one, I think, I, I'm curious to hear your perspective on it from a change management perspective, right? Like oftentimes when we work with clients, there are tangible projects that need to be accomplished to increase the value of the company.
Mhm.
And we're honest with our clients when we say it's going to take discretionary effort because you're doing more than just maintaining status quo and doing the day to day. So, and a lot of people know, like in the beginning, it's going to feel worse because you're making change, you're doing something new, you're learning something new, you're out with the old, you're transition. Like we just know it can be messy, right? And so, um, how do you deal with when you have like 4 or 5 of those projects going on or potentially going on? Like, what is a good approach in terms of pacing it or how to relate of it in for you personally as a business owner, but then also for your team?
Mhm. Yeah, too much. I can summarize it in a sentence. Too much change is bad. If you're trying to do too many projects, and every project that you do is change. We always used to talk about it in the way of if you're moving the coffee machine from room A to room B, that's a change that people are going to have to get used to, that will drive resistance no matter how small. It will frustrate people, and that's a change. And if you have 100 little ones like that going on, people are going to get fed up. And if you have 2 to 3 really big changes, think more along the lines of how they do their job or what their mindset should be, or especially cultural shifts, cultural changes. Those are all very big projects and take a lot of um, effort for an individual. Um, we refer to this as change fatigue. And if there's too many changes happening, there's a limit that people can actually tolerate to change and to focus on. And, if they have to do a whole different software system, that's a lot of new.
Mm-hmm.
More new you have, the more time you need on the back end to kind of get back to status and make what we always call a current to future state, make the future state your new current state. And so you're comfortable in that new current state. But if you're doing one change and you get to the future state, and you're still just kind of working it out and learning the future state, and then you do a whole different project that's going to change your current state, future to future state.
Mm-hmm.
Get lost in that, but you get what I mean. Like if you're doing too many back to back to back without giving people time to kind of rest, relax, recharge on doing something different, you're gonna get a lot of disgruntled people.
Yeah.
And that's on the team side, and yourself as well. As a business owner, you can only handle so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and it's important to pay attention to when, as a business owner, when you work on projects, who are the people that are really driving it and impacted by the change? Because
Right. Mhm.
I have one example where they they did a they moved their CRM system, they updated their accounting, and then and they had an audit coming up. And those were 3 huge things, and all were tied to the office manager needing to coordinate those projects. And that office manager was not a happy camper because all 3 of them, that person was kind of like the hub where it came together with the CRM, with the integration of the new bookkeeping accounting software, and then with getting all the documentations ready for an audit. And so as an owner, you have to pay attention that now you had like 3 major projects where one person was was like in the spotlight about it, versus you could still have had a simultaneous project running, like we're redoing our website and we need language from the marketing team or to sales, and those people weren't all that much affected by any of the three. The CRM system, yes, a little bit, but
Mhm.
I think we get the point of like understanding that as a business you have capacity and you have different players, and there can be simultaneous projects going on. But I think two things to pay attention to is who are the people and what is their capacity for it, and then where is their integration, that if you're changing things on the marketing process and you're working on the CRM system, that doesn't go together all that well, even though on the outside they look like two separate projects. And that can, anyway, those are real examples I've had over the I think last couple of years that were just too much change going on, and they initially didn't settle on, okay, future state is now current state, and we're proficient, and it doesn't take discretionary effort to just do the day to day, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
That's, planning, the bigger the company, the bigger the company, the more people that are impacted at that company, the more of the change planning something like that needs. And that's where you can identify and ask the question, who is actually being affected by this change and how? Whether it's changes being done to them, like a process change, or they need to help facilitate the change, like in your example, you can identify those areas. And a big part of prepping for change is understanding resistance and where resistance is going to come from. And that's one of those questions that will help uncover some of those things, because they can be blind spots. Like you say, these are seemingly unrelated projects. So you're like, oh, it could be fine. But like you mentioned, the office manager's at the center of all of them
Yeah.
and is pulled 100 different directions to get it all done. So
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay, so those were three key aspects. Again, coming back to thinking of yourself as a business owner, what are some things you can do to make sure you are taking care of yourself and showing up strong? And I think what we've covered today, right, is separating yourself from the business. You are not your business. Separate identity and activity. Then we talked about getting clear what your pull factors are. You're usually very clear what your push factors are. Getting clear what your pull factors are, and then also looking at pacing the projects and what you're doing in a way that the change that you're bringing in is going to be sustainable. It can be sustained, I think, and it's done in a way where you're taking your people and your capacity for change into account, so that you really can do a good job and not just half-ass it, essentially. Um, so I think with that, let's complete today's show, and then I think next week we're going to get into an interesting topic, which is all about second guessing.
yeah,
I would say,
good.
and well, the beautiful things that it does to us when we second guess ourselves.
Oh yeah, go into spiral.
So, okay, good. Stephen, thank you so much for today's conversation, and to our listeners as well. Um, our intent is always that you get get into this conversation around value building, exit planning, not as a scary thing, but something that just you just do because it's part, and we will all exit our business eventually. So, thank you, and see you guys next week.
Thank you. Right.